Over the man's face was a mask made of 200 jade pieces, to the Mayans, more precious than gold. The sarcophagus lid, its colors restored, shows a priest looking up through sacred trees. It appears the lid was intended to help the deceased to heavenly paradise. The pyramids, however, had another more grisly connection with death. They were often the scene of grim ceremonies ending in human sacrifice. Why were such technically advanced people so mesmerized by blood and death? When archaeologists excavated the Caracol at Chichen Itza, they found 14 skulls on a platform adjoining the main stairway. The skulls belonged to victims of human sacrifice. The most common form of sacrifice, the heart was torn, still beating, from the victim's chest by the high priest and offered to the gods. The victims were prisoners of war, slaves, or even devout volunteers. Often, the body was divided among priests and populace and eaten.
According to Dr. Roos, we don't know whether the Mayans performed sacrifices on the tops of the pyramids. For the Aztecs, we have information from the writings of the chroniclers, including some drawings. And there you can see that they made human sacrifices in front of the temple on the tops of the pyramids. After they killed the sacrificial victims, they threw them down the stairs.
In front of the Pyramid of Mexico City was a bizarre structure called the Skull Rack. According to Spanish reports, it contained 136,000 human heads. The Aztec obsession with sacrifice was no isolated example. 5 centuries earlier, the Mayans of Chichen Itza also practiced sacrifice. It is believed that this platform once supported poles on which were stacked the heads of sacrificial victims. There were many situations that called for sacrifice. The rain god had to be appeased. And to protect the sun during its nightly passage through the underworld, priests felt compelled to make daily offerings of human hearts and blood. Ancient Mexican and Mayan art is rich in death-inspired images. Nightmare visions of the grotesque, the fantastic, and the terrifying abound. The famous calendar stone, found near the Aztec pyramid, embodies the highest flowering of their science and art. At its center is the sun god. Sticking out in the form of a knife, his tongue depicts the god's incessant demand to be fed with human hearts and blood. Why were these people so preoccupied with death? How could cultures so advanced in art and science be so obsessed by blood and sacrifice? They were a people who invented zero and counted time in the millions of years. Yet, slaughter fascinated them more than anything else. In the shadow of the pyramid was the bustling marketplace. Amidst clay pots and garden vegetables, a young man leads a procession. He is dressed in the garb of the god to whom he will be sacrificed. Such sacrificial victims felt especially honored, since their souls would rise to the house of the sun. For ancient Mexicans, there were no absolute barriers between the living and the dead. They feared death, but believed it flowed naturally from life. We know their descendants, simple corn farmers living in the torrid plains and jungle villages of Central America. In the Yucatan, most of the villagers are pure Mayan. Today, the Mayans' descendants remain suspended between ancient and modern worlds, tied to unfathomed mysteries in the buried cities of their ancestors. Deep in the Guatemala jungle is the most awesome of all Mayan ruins, the fabulous city of Tikal. Like ancient skyscrapers, its huge pyramids pierce the rainforest canopy. They support dark, narrow temples with walls up to 40 feet thick. Crowning the temples are giant roof cones covered with ornate but decaying sculpture. Once, gleaming white plaster coated the pyramids. Temples were painted a gaudy red. Great crowds gathered in the plazas to watch spectacles of pomp and sacrifice.
La población no tenía acceso.
The population didn't have access to the temples, which were on tops of the pyramids. The only ones allowed were the priests. For the ordinary people, the pyramids were proof that the ruling class had great power, that they had better obey.
Perhaps the pyramids were symbols of ruling class power, designed to awe and frighten the populace. The pyramid stairs are so steep that some tourists have slipped and fallen to their deaths. Perhaps they were built so that bodies of sacrificial victims would roll unimpeded to the ground. Everywhere at Tikal are altars paired with vertical stones called stelae. A common theme of altar carvings is the bound prisoner destined for decapitation. On one stone, skull and thigh bones represent the captive, dispatched by two executioners with stone knives. Why are there so many altars at Tikal? Could it have known the horrors of mass sacrifice? More than 50,000 people once lived in Tikal. But in 889 AD, the dates carved in stone suddenly stopped. The city was mysteriously abandoned. The whole Mayan empire collapsed. No one knows why. The jungle has today reclaimed its territory. Once gleaming temples have crumbled to ruin. No other civilizations vanished so mysteriously. Most experts believe the city dwellers fled to small villages, leaving the ceremonial centers empty. Why did they leave? What chased them out? In ancient America, gods and men met in ways we may never understand. Animalistic, fatalistic, and magical ideas ruled supreme. For these peoples, reality was multi-leveled, like the steps of their pyramids. In a system of mystical thinking alien to us, pyramids were symbolic stairways to heaven, the ultimate in spiritual technology. Somewhere in the vast gulf between the pyramid builders' accomplishments and their practices lies the answer to their mysterious disappearance. Primeval jungle spreads round Tikal in every direction. The dense rainforest covers 20,000 square miles, concealing countless ruins. Archaeologists are just now uncovering what could be the greatest ruin of all. 50 miles north of Tikal, an old Mayan road stretches toward the unexcavated city of El Mirador and its giant rubble-covered pyramids. Today, El Mirador is almost completely concealed by vegetation. Both larger and older than Tikal, it may be the first true city of the Americas. At El Mirador, archaeologists hope to find crucial clues to the strange fate of the lost civilization of the Americas.
Coming up next, 20th Century with Mike Wallace reports on the winners and losers of America's ever-expanding gambling mania. Then the Coast Guard sets sail on Weapons at War.